Ashley, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You are a Goodwill Ambassador for the United Nations Population Fund, and you have been since 2016. Why did you want to take on that role, Ashley, and what have been some of the biggest challenges for you so far?
Well, thank you so much for asking, and I have to acknowledge UNFPA and how honored I am to serve as their Goodwill Ambassador and the trust in which they've placed me and the opportunities they've given me to travel to South Sudan and Turkey and Jordan and Kenya and the Democratic Republic of Congo and other places, visiting their life-saving programs. I am a big advocate for family planning because I see that it not only saves women's lives, it helps empower their lives and help them take a sense of agency over if to have children, when to have children, how many children to have, and how to space the intervals of the children they choose to have. You know, in the Congo, for example, where I just did a mission with UNFPA, the single most urgent thing on the women's minds with whom I sat was they were in terror of their next unintended pregnancy because they already had as many as 8 to 14 children. They can only feed those children one meal a day. Because of the cultural practices, the men eat the best nutrition, so the children they have are malnourished. And the women don't generate any income because they do all of the labor. They're down at the river fetching the water, they're doing the wash, they're in the rainforest gathering the wood. And this isn't just in the DRC, you know, in a refugee camp in Bangladesh, for example. You know, it's very difficult circumstances under which to give birth. And so when women all over the world have access to voluntary modern family planning methods, and half of all pregnancies worldwide, including in the United States, are unintended, women expand their choices and they expand their life opportunities. And we know that 3 things are necessary for a woman to be empowered: reproductive autonomy, economic independence, and female friendships. And so UNFPA, we're very dedicated to voluntary family planning. And that's important to me, as is ending, you know, male violence towards women, which is another part of UNFPA's mandate. Because, you know, 1 in 3 of us, including me, worldwide experience physical and sexual abuse at the hands of men.
Ashley, as you're talking a lot there about the challenges that you've seen, what has shocked you the most, you think, in your travels? You have gone to different countries with the UNFPA.
You know, I would say what has shocked me the most is, and what has broken my heart in a really beautiful way, is the creativity and the resilience of the youth. Because also part of UNFPA's mandate is helping youth reach their full potential and grow into adulthood safely. So, for example, in the Azraq refugee camp in Jordan, filled with Syrian refugees, I saw the youth present a play about the emotional pain of son preference, you know, and they were totally autonomous in the creation of the topic of their play, and they put together this skit that I would have been proud to show Bob Carnegie at Playhouse West, where I trained as an actor, about the emotional distress that it caused both the boys and the girls in the families to see their parents lavish the nutrition, the income, the emotional care and attention on the boys instead of the girls. And it was the youth who came up with this, and it's the youth who are going to change these behaviors and who are going to be responsible for when we hit 8 billion people on this little planet on the 15th of November, who are going to improve and ameliorate all our circumstances so that we can finally achieve gender equality.
Ashley, as you say there, the 8 billion figure, which we're going to reach very, very soon. What does that mean from the UNFPA's perspective, and how does it change its priorities, do you think?
UNFPA's priorities are stable and the same. No woman should die giving life. 800 women die a day from preventable pregnancy and delivery causes. You know, I've seen that. You know, I have friends who have lost children while trying to transit to a safe place to give birth. I'm so proud of UNFPA's safe delivery kits, which are being distributed in the Ukraine, where women are still, you know, delivering their babies in the midst of a ghastly war, and people can support that effort on unfpa.org. You know, helping youth grow into adulthood safely, as I mentioned, voluntary family planning, and ending male entitlement to female bodies, and ending this epidemic of violence with which we live. As I said, 1 in 3. So our priorities are the same. We do have some, you know, complex humanitarian disasters around the world. Yemen, Syria, Venezuela, DRC. So we do prioritize those areas where girls and women are living in acute crises, such as I have seen in Bangladesh, where I met my friend Ajita, who was pregnant with her 9th child when she fled Myanmar and the genocide there. 4 of her children died while she was fleeing. And I met her when she was getting maternal care for the first time in her life, and it was at a UNFPA clinic. So, as I said, our mission is stable, but sometimes we do have these crisis priorities.
How does it affect you personally, Ashley, when you witness this going on, as you just spoke about in Bangladesh, and of course when you went to Ukraine, and how worried are you about the women and girls and their safety in Ukraine now?
You know, I'm very worried. I visited with young women who are survivors of gender-based violence, and we're doing psychosocial support, and rape is a tool of war, and I'm so glad for the High Commissioner on sexual and gender-based violence and in war at the UN, and talk about someone who is a stout, robust person with a profound strength in order to be able to endure the things that she sees. But the way it affects me is that it makes me more determined. It makes me hopefully more conscious. Hopefully it makes me more tender. And I really think of all the women with whom I spent time in the displaced persons camp in South Sudan, because in addition to weeping when women were being presented with their family planning options for the first time, 100% of them wanted to prevent unintended pregnancies. We also danced. We actually think we had the first women's march in a refugee camp, or IDP camp, I should say. Beautiful things happened. There was an older woman who was blind with whom I was sitting, and I felt I couldn't do enough for her, and I broke down, and she put her hands on my head and she said, "You'll always be my granddaughter," because empathy had passed between us. And so sometimes there's the action, and there's the program, and there's the facilitation, and sometimes it's just the profound depth of being a part of the human community. And all of that means a lot to me. And then I also just pray a lot and have a lot of spiritual support from my wisdom teacher and my other guides in life.
What about the pandemic, Ashley? The impact of that on gender-based violence? How worried have you been about that?
Well, you're very right to bring up the COVID-19 pandemic and the disproportionate effect it has had on girls and women, because, male temper violence at home has escalated, and with the displacement of work and the lockdowns, violence against girls and women from men has escalated drastically. And so we have very much been responding to their needs with helplines, with safe spaces, and we've asked for more, urgent funding from our international partners in order to try to create safety and refuge for girls and women during this time. And the data is there for Western countries as well. I mean, use of violent pornography has skyrocketed in America and throughout Western Europe. I mean, the data is there. And, men need support too, so that they can get outside of this man box, if you want to call it that, or, their norms that are damaging to them as well as they are to girls and women. But UNFPA has been uniquely well suited to respond to the violence against girls and women during the pandemic, yes.
And how much do you think men should be part of the conversation?
Oh, it's essential that men are a part of the conversation, and I'm very careful when I talk about violence against women or the fact that I was raped to make sure that I don't put myself as a passive person, because from whence did this violence come? It was perpetrated by a man, and it's not all men. It is some men, and it is a lot of men. And so men have to take responsibility for themselves. And also we acknowledge that it's an inherited system of patriarchy. But within that system of patriarchy, they have so many privileges and entitlements, and it's their responsibility to do that self-inquiry and then to shrug off those privileges and entitlements and say, I want to live a better way.
Has there been progress, do you think, in attitudes and awareness?
There has been so much progress. I mean, the conversations we just had in the Central African rainforest were absolutely remarkable. I sat with Dr. Achu, my UNFPA colleague, and Junior, my UNFPA colleague, and all of the men wanted family planning. for their families. I mean, it was, and this word, expressed is we don't say expressed unless it's genuinely verbalized. And they wanted, because there's polygamy in that community. And so the men are supporting up to 20 children themselves. And they are acutely aware of the suffering within their families. And that's enormous progress, that within an African culture that sees a bounty of children as a blessing, that they understand that limiting and spacing births is something that's going to be life-saving for them, as well as for their forest community, because there's so much pressure on the forest and resources right now. And then they also were talking about attitudes and, men beating women and men eating all the good nutrition, as I referred to earlier. They were totally open to having those conversations. And those used to be totally taboo and strictly within the righteousness of a man's position in society. So, it's, I think that is a hallmark of a precipice of deeper change.
I want to ask you about the UNFPA's 2022 State of World Population Report that has said that nearly half of all pregnancies worldwide are unintended. What questions does that raise, do you think, Ashley, about the rights and opportunities for women and girls globally?
My Nana had an unintended pregnancy. My mom had an unintended pregnancy. Unintended pregnancy is so ubiquitous, and it takes us back to our opening point. Family planning is critical for girls and women to prevent these unintended pregnancies. First of all, we can help reduce the need for abortion, which everyone wants to do. That is something on which we can agree universally and unanimously. And it's impossible when you have unintended pregnancies and you can't care for the child that you have, whether it's through healthcare, whether it's through nutrition, whether it's through childcare, when you're seeking employment, to reach your full potential and be a contributing member of society. And so I know that those things sound abstract, but the stories are very real with the women with whom I engage around the world. And, some women are able to successfully give birth, like the woman with whom I visited in Zatari, who was delivered the 5,000th safe birth in the refugee camp, thanks to UNFPA. And then there are women for whom at this time in their life it's not suitable, and they need to be able to plan and space the births of their children.
And of course, there's been huge controversy about the decision in the United States of the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade. How did you feel when you heard about it?
Well, from the UNFPA position, we obviously don't comment on member states' internal political positions, but we do know that abortion happens, and that 60% of the abortions that happen with unintended pregnancies are unsafe. And so that's something, abortion care, post-abortion care must be available to save the life of the woman. Personally, when a man raped me in 1999, it was necessary for me to have an abortion. So being able to access legal and safe abortion was essential for me. And, one of my very close family members and I just had a beautiful conversation about this last night. And I understand that people have a variety of opinions. And where I come down is that even if a person doesn't feel that it's appropriate for them, for whatever their particular reasoning may be, every individual should be autonomous in their reproductive choices, because democracy starts at our skin.
Are you worried, Ashley, that this will reverberate into other women's rights and it's turning back time on women's choices?
Well, again, speaking as an individual and not as UNFPA's Goodwill Ambassador, so making sure I'm very clear about swapping hats here. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas's concurring opinion, we should take him at his word. He's coming after family planning. And, one of the senators from here in Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn, she agreed with that and said that the legal wording of the Griswold decision, which allowed us to use family planning, was constitutionally unsound. We need to back up, take them seriously, and make sure we protect our ability to plan and space the births of our children.
A lot of young girls feel quite frightened and threatened by the decision. Do you understand the way they feel?
I totally understand the way they feel. When that man raped me, if I had not been able to have an abortion, I would have had to co-parent with him, because in many states, and people can go to RAINN.org, the Rape and Incest National Network, to look up the laws in their states, rapists have paternity rights. So not only are we demanding that children and women carry to term the pregnancy that occurred through rape, they're saying you will potentially have to co-parent with the man who raped you. That's what overturning Roe v. Wade does, and what the states are doing when they criminalize termination.
And for those who do support the Supreme Court's decision, what would you say to them?
I would say, I love you, I understand you, we share a country, we share a constitution, and I understand this is not a choice that you would make for yourself, and democracy starts at our skin. Your individual choice should not encroach on the autonomy of another woman and her family, her individual relationship with the God of her understanding, to intuitively know what is right for herself and her life at this particular moment in time. One woman in her own lifespan may choose to carry a pregnancy to term, and another pregnancy may not be appropriate for her to carry to term. The majority of women in this country who have abortions already have 2 to 3 children. And they may be married or partnered, or they may be unmarried and unpartnered, but they already know that their motherhood is vital to their existence, and that another child is not sustainable for them at this time.
It just seems, Ashley, to be so polarizing for the United States. And you have those extremes. You have the overturning, of course, of Roe versus Wade. You have communities that, are worried, and I'm talking about LGBTQ and how it will impact them. Are you surprised with this polarization in your country?
I am, and that's one of the reasons why I love working for UNFPA, because we understand at UNFPA that everyone deserves the dignity of being who they are, and especially those young people arriving at adulthood safe and free from violence, free from coercion, and with humane, medically accurate sex education so they can make informed decisions about their bodies, and that the youth themselves contain the seeds of the solutions. And I've seen it in the Kibera slum in Kenya, where, and I've seen it in India, where I was making menstrual pads with tribal girls, who were understanding their menses when previously they hadn't been taught about how their own bodies work. And these humane programs just help young people understand that the solutions are within them, and they're community-based, and it's not about individuals fighting each other.
What is your message on World Population Day? What would you like your role at the UNFPA to really do and to change ideologies around the world?
That's a very kind question. I think that, when we hear the number 8 billion, it's so big, it's so abstract, it's like, well, who cares? But I think because of the travels that UNFPA has so generously granted me the opportunity to be a part of, I would say that the stories are real. The joys, the triumphs, the progress. More people are educated than ever before. We have healthier outcomes than ever before. In many parts of the world, maternal mortality is down, child survival is higher. That's not true in the Sahel, and in Congo, maternal mortality is higher than ever. And women still need to be able to have reproductive autonomy and choose if and when to have children and how to space the births of the children, because they know best, And a woman can decide, I'm pretty tired right now, and I can barely invest in the children I have, and having another one right now would totally deplete me. And so trusting women and their families to access their family planning and make those decisions is really the key to poverty alleviation worldwide.
Where does your own passion to fight for social justice and to use your voice to advocate for others come from?
Well, as I said, my Nana was married as a teenager and had an unintended pregnancy herself. My mom had an unintended pregnancy. I was molested for the first time. I do it all the time. A man molested me for the first time that I remember when I was 7. I was commercially sexually exploited for a summer when I was 14, and this is the up with which I will not put. And I believe gender equality will help solve the majority of the world's problems.
Ashley Judd, thank you so much for joining me today. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It was nice to be with you.